This is Descr, Masculist, MGTOW, flyers. That is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo Descr. This is flyer number 358, entitled Monoconscious Feminazi Bigots. That's MFBs. Description. This flyer introduces a new term, Monoconscious Feminazi Bigot, MFB, that masculists can hurl at monoconscious feminazis for their callousness towards men, for their ignorance of how women oppress men. There is power in labels. This label is for the masculists today, as was the term male Chauvinist Pig, MCP, for the second wave feminists in the 60s and 70s. Flyer itself. Monoconscious Feminazi Bigots, that's MFBs, by Prof. Dr. Hugo Descr. Email profhugodescr@yahoo.com. Website profhugodescr.wordpress.com. This flyer introduces a term, a label, that masculists can hurl back at feminazis, that is, the particularly obnoxious, in-your-face type of feminists that all men find repulsive, punishing them by totally ignoring them. This flyer states that it's not enough to simply ignore them, but to attack them verbally with an angry masculist harangue, telling these feminazi bitches that they are bigots, that is, monoconscious Feminazi Bigots, MFBs. I need to define some terms here for those not familiar with them already. Monoconscious means that one has had only one consciousness raised, usually one's feminist consciousness, and know nothing about masculism, hence have not had one's masculist consciousness raised, hence one is not bi-conscious. That is, one has not had both one's feminist and one's masculist consciousness raised. Monoconscious feminists tend to be feminazi bitchy because they've had a lifetime of feminist doctrine pumped into them and know nothing about masculism because the latter is too new for them. They have probably never even heard the term masculist before. So not surprisingly, by default, they associate the idea of gender oppression with gender oppression of women, perpetrated by men against women. So of course they are angry at men for this. And it is this anger which makes them surly, resentful, misandrist, male-dumping, feminazi bitches. A bigot is defined here as someone who stubbornly refuses to listen to contrary evidence regarding that person's very negative opinions of some social group. Masculists see monoconscious feminazis as bigots because masculists see masculist ideas and masculist claims as that contrary evidence that masculists expect everyone to be familiar with as masculist ideas spread throughout the culture. Those feminists who remain monoconscious, that is, who refuse to absorb masculist ideas, will be seen increasingly as bigots, as callous regarding the oppression that women inflict on men. This monoconscious feminazi bigotry will anger masculists, motivating masculists to verbally attack monoconscious feminazis for the latter's bigotry. Monoconscious feminists feel they have the right to be angry at men. They only have to look at their feminist ideas, their female experience, to see how men oppress women. Masculists don't deny that men can oppress women. A masculist only has to read feminist books to see that. For example, the many historical fights that women had to go through to get equal rights with men. Speaking personally, if I were a woman, I'd be a second wave feminist. In fact, speaking as a masculist, I am a second wave feminist, pushing for equal rights and opportunities for women, since I see such things as essential prerequisites for the effective fipping of women. That is, if women are to become FIPs, that's financially independent persons, then they will obviously need to be given equal rights and opportunities, but no female privileges. Masculists expect women to to accept not only equal rights with men, but equal obligations as well, especially becoming FIPs, expecting to pull their weight financially, not expecting to be able to parasite off the labour and money of a man. With this monoconscious knowledge of the feminists, it's not surprising that feminists feel they have the right to be angry at men and to lash out at them feminazi style for the ways they feel that men oppress women. But we now live in the growing era of masculism, men's lib, in which men are waking up in their millions that men are oppressed by women, and in fact far worse than vice versa. Because women's oppression of men is far deeper, far stronger, and in capital letters, lasting decades. I'm talking here about women's financial parasitism of men, lasting decades of a man's life, her man's slavery, that is, her sitting on her fat parasitic ass, having a man work for her, living off his money, his labour. I'm talking about the fluffy feminist hypocrisy in the divorce courts, which makes masculists murderously angry at fluffies, that is, women who expect to be able to parasite off the labour of a man by not bothering to get a career-competent education, having a deeply ingrained attitude that most women have that, in quotes,
men exist on this earth to pay for women to have babies.
I'm talking about the many gender crimes women commit against men. For example, lying to their husbands/boyfriends about taking the pill, wanting to get pregnant, then expecting him to pay for the kid that he does not want. That is, masculists are very angry that women have the MARER, that's M-A-R-E-R, that is, maternity rejection right. That is, the right to reject an unwanted pregnancy. But men have no PARER, P-A-R-E-R, paternity rejection right. That is, men don't have the legal right to reject an unwanted pregnancy, being seen by women and the law merely as cash machines to be abused and robbed, to pay for women's desire to have babies. This most blatant of all sexual discriminations makes masculists extremely angry due to its utter hypocrisy and inconsistency that screams out for reform. To legislate the para, it's important that women become FIPs, so masculist theorists push very hard for the fipping of women, for the creation of a FIP society, in which both sexes, especially girls, are socialised and educated to be FIPs. When all women are FIPs as adults, they can afford to pay for their own kids. Traditionally, a man paid for himself, his kids, and for a parasitic wife who lived off his money. A FIP mother pays for herself, her kids, but not for a parasitic father. She has less of a burden in financial terms than the traditional father. Thus, masculists have plenty of reason to be angry at women. So when they are confronted by an angry monoconscious feminazi, it's not surprising that masculists explode in rage at her for her monoconscious ignorance, her bigotry. If she refuses to acknowledge female gender oppression of men, making her seem utterly callous towards men, hence the masculist anger at her. Masculist theorists are predicting that the monoconscious biconscious polarity will split the feminist movement, perhaps even destroying it. The split will be between the monoconscious and biconscious feminists. The biconscious feminists will see the monoconscious feminists as bigots, the way masculists do, and the monoconscious feminists will see the biconscious feminists as traitors who have given in to the rhetoric of the enemy, that is, men. This attitude of the monoconscious feminists will be seen by both biconscious feminists and masculists as bigotry, showing a real callousness against men, ignoring the way that women oppress men, and to a degree much stronger and longer lasting than vice versa. Biconscious feminists will also see monoconscious feminists as fools, slow-witted, being unable to absorb quickly the valid arguments of the masculists concerning how women oppress men. The monoconscious feminists will be seen by the biconscious feminists as being dumber, slower, and more closed-minded. The biconscious feminists and the masculists will claim that it's in the self-interest of monoconscious feminists to become biconscious, because by becoming biconscious they will lose their monoconscious anger at the other sex, because they will see that gender oppression is a, in capital letters, a two-way street, that women oppress men too, especially with a financial parasitism and manslavery of men by fluffies. Biconscious feminists tend to lose their traditional monoconscious anger at men for the ways that men oppress women, because they can see that women also oppress men, so that their feminist anger at men is more or less cancelled by an oppositely directed masculist anger at how women oppress men. Biconscious feminists are therefore much calmer, less feminazi bitchy at men, and hence more approachable by men. So biconscious women are much more likely to have a boyfriend than is a rabid, misandrist, male-dumping, monoconscious feminazi bigot. In the early days of the second wave of feminism, that is, in the late 60s and early 70s, the second wave feminists used the term
male chauvinist pig.
MCP. It was such a commonly used term in those days, and in brackets, that I'm old enough to remember as a young male feminist at the time, strongly hoping that the adultification of women that I hoped feminism would cause would eventuate, but it never did. Women remain today as intellectually vacuous as ever, contributing almost nothing to world culture, to world ideas, winning still a pathetic 1% of science Nobel Prizes, having 10% smaller brains than men, having a lower average IQ than men by 4 IQ points, having a 10% lower IQ variance than men, etc. in brackets. The term male chauvinist pig, which second-wave feminists used to label the attitude of men at the time towards women, that is, good for only fucking and child-raising, not to be taken seriously, not to be listened to be intellectually ignored, to be seen and treated as the inferior sex, etc., was so common that it got abbreviated into an acronym,
MCP.
If young feminists in the 60s came across such attitudes in men, they hurled the label
MCP
at these men and were very angry with them. Jump forward half a century, when I'm now an old man, and we are seeing a repeat of history, but this time in the opposite direction, from men towards women, using the label MFB. As masculist ideas spread through the culture, masculists will expect women to have absorbed them and to change their monoconscious attitudes towards men, as an ever higher percentage of women, or feminists, become biconscious due to exposure to masculist ideas. Those women, those feminists who remain stuck in the old monoconscious attitudes towards men, seeing men as the sole gender oppressors, will be seen increasingly as bigots, as stubborn, dumber, gender political retards, and will be abused increasingly by being labelled MFBs to their face, delivered with real venom and contempt. There is real power in labels. A label can be applied with great emotional force. If someone gets labelled a racist or ageist or sexist, then that person knows he/she is being insulted, which is a painful experience. Masculists need a label that has the equivalent emotional force as the second wave feminists' MCP. That new label is MFB, Monoconscious Feminazi Bigot. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man-Slaves to Women. An e-textbook of 350 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses, freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.